The wedding was 3 weeks away when Helena Walsh discovered her younger sister crouching beside her dresser drawer at dawn, the candlelight catching on the diamond ring their grandmother had passed down through 4 generations. Rose looked up with eyes full of something Helena had never seen before, something wild and desperate, and before Helena could even speak, her sister was running, the ring clutched in her fist, her boots thundering down the wooden stairs and out into the Arizona darkness. Helena stood frozen in her nightgown, watching from her bedroom window as Rose threw a saddle onto their father's best mare and rode east toward the breaking light, becoming nothing more than a dust cloud on the horizon outside Prescott. The shock of it kept Helena still for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Her breath came in short gasps as she tried to understand what had just happened. Rose, her baby sister, who was only 19 years old, had just stolen the one thing that meant everything to Helena beyond measure. That ring was supposed to be on her finger when she married Thomas Everett in front of the whole town, the same ring their grandmother had worn when she married their grandfather in 1825, the same ring their mother had worn when she married their father before dying giving birth to Rose. Helena pressed her palm against the cool glass of the window and felt her heart breaking into pieces. She had spent months planning this wedding, months preparing to become Mrs. Thomas Everett, the wife of Prescott's most successful merchant. Thomas had courted her properly for 2 years, bringing flowers every Sunday after church, taking her to community dances, promising her a good life in the big house he was building on the north side of town. She had said yes because it seemed like the right thing to do, because at 23 she was already considered close to being a spinster by the town gossips, because Thomas was kind and stable and her father approved. But now the ring was gone, stolen by her own flesh and blood, and Helena had no idea why. She dressed quickly in a simple brown traveling dress and braided her long, honey-colored hair with shaking fingers. Her father was already up, standing in the kitchen with his coffee, staring at the open back door where Rose had fled. He looked old suddenly, his weathered face more lined than Helena remembered. "She took the ring," Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," her father said. He set down his coffee cup with a heavy thud. "I heard the commotion, saw her ride off. Why would she do this? What reason could she possibly have?" Her father shook his head slowly. "Rose has been strange these past few months. Secretive. I thought it was just her age. You know how young girls can be. But this—" He trailed off, looking lost. Helena felt tears burning behind her eyes, but refused to let them fall. "I have to go after her. I have to get the ring back. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and Thomas expects me to wear it. His whole family will be there. People are coming from as far as Flagstaff. I cannot walk down that aisle without grandmother's ring." Her father looked at her with something like concern mixed with resignation. "Helena, you know I cannot leave the ranch right now. We have 50 head of cattle that need moving to summer pasture, and I cannot do it alone. If you go after Rose, you will be going alone." "Then I go alone," Helena said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "I will find her and I will bring back that ring." She packed quickly, throwing supplies into saddlebags with efficiency born from years of ranch life. Dried beef, hardtack, a canteen of water, matches, a bedroll, her father's old Colt revolver that she barely knew how to use. She changed into riding clothes, practical denim pants that scandalized the church ladies but were necessary for long rides across rough country. Her father helped her saddle Juniper, their gentlest mare, and pressed some paper money into her hand. "Be careful," he said gruffly. "Your sister has at least an hour head start, and she took Lightning. That horse can cover ground like the devil himself." Helena nodded, swinging up into the saddle with practiced ease. The sun was fully up now, burning bright and hot in the endless Arizona sky. It was June of 1884, and the summer heat was already fierce even at this early hour. She could see the dust trail Rose had left, heading east toward the rougher country where the pine forests began to thicken. She rode hard for the first 2 hours, pushing Juniper faster than she normally would, following the tracks that were still visible in the dusty earth. The landscape changed gradually as she traveled. the scrubby desert around Prescott giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper trees and occasional pines. The air smelled like sun-baked earth and sage, and the only sounds were the rhythmic thudding of juniper's hooves and the cry of a hawk somewhere overhead. By midday, Helena was starting to doubt herself. The tracks had become harder to follow as the ground grew rockier, and she had no real experience as a tracker. She stopped beside a small creek to let Juniper drink and to refill her canteen, sitting on a smooth boulder and trying not to think about how vast and empty this country was. She had never been this far from home alone before. Young women simply did not do such things, not in 1884, not without a male escort or at least another woman for propriety. But Helena found she did not care much about propriety at the moment. All she cared about was finding Rose and understanding why her sister had betrayed her so completely. She was about to remount when she heard the sound of approaching hooves. Her hand went instinctively to the revolver at her hip, though she kept it holstered. A rider appeared through the trees, sitting tall in the saddle on a rangy paint horse. He was a cowboy. That much was obvious from his worn leather chaps and dusty hat, probably in his mid-20s with dark hair and darker eyes that assessed her quickly. "Madam," he said, touching the brim of his hat politely, "you look like you might be lost." Helena bristled at the assumption. "I am not lost. I am tracking someone." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Tracking? Out here alone?" His eyes took in her practical clothing, the saddlebags, the determined set of her jaw. "Begging your pardon, but that seems like dangerous business for a lady traveling solo." "I did not ask for your opinion," Helena said sharply, though she knew she was being unfair. The man was just being courteous, concerned even. She softened her tone slightly. "My sister rode this way early this morning. She took something that belongs to me, something very important. I need to find her." The cowboy dismounted, looping his reins around a low branch. He walked to the creek and knelt down, studying the ground with the practiced eye of someone who knew this country. There were tracks here, recent ones, heading northeast toward the high country. "That your sister?" "Yes," Helena said, feeling a flutter of hope. "She is riding a black mare, very fast. She has several hours' head start on me." The man stood, brushing dust from his knees. If she is heading into the high country, she is either meeting someone or running from something. That is rough territory up there, not the kind of place a young woman should be alone. He paused, looking at Helena with what seemed like genuine concern. "Same goes for you, if you do not mind me saying." "I do mind you saying, actually," Helena replied, but there was less heat in her words now. The truth was she was relieved to see another human being after hours of solitary riding. "But I appreciate your concern. I am Helena Walsh from Prescott." "And you are?" "Jacob Nolan," he said, extending a calloused hand. Helena shook it, noting his firm grip and the honesty in his dark eyes. "I work for the Double Bar Ranch about 10 miles north of here. Was checking fence lines when I heard your horse." "Well, Mr. Nolan, I thank you for your help identifying the tracks, but I should be going now. I am losing daylight." Jacob Nolan looked up at the sun, then back at Helena with an expression that was hard to read. "Miss Walsh, I mean no disrespect, but if you ride into that high country alone, you might not come back. There are plenty of dangers up there beyond just getting lost. Mountain lions, bears, rough men who would not think twice about robbing a lone traveler. Let me ride with you, at least until we find your sister." Helena wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her independence and prove she could handle this herself, but she was practical enough to recognize the truth in his words. She was already out of her depth, and having someone who knew the country could mean the difference between finding Rose and ending up lost or worse. "All right," she said finally. "But I am paying you for your time. This is a job, not charity." Something flickered across Jacob's face, maybe amusement or respect. "No payment necessary, Miss Walsh. Call it cowboy courtesy. Besides, I am curious now about why a sister would steal from her own blood. Must be quite a story." They rode together through the afternoon, the conversation starting slowly, but gradually becoming easier. Jacob proved to be a good tracker, following signs that Helena would have missed entirely. A broken branch here, a disturbed patch of pine needles there, the faint impression of a horseshoe in soft earth. He explained what he was seeing as they went, and Helena found herself learning despite her worry. "You have worked cattle long?" she asked during a brief rest. "Since I was 14, Jacob said. Lost both my parents to cholera that year, 1873. The ranch owner, Mr. Davis, took me in and taught me the trade. Been working for him ever since." He glanced at her. "What about you? You ride like someone who grew up on horseback." "My father has a small ranch outside Prescott," Helena explained. "After my mother died, he raised Rose and me to be capable. He always said frontier women need to know how to work as hard as any man." "Sounds like a wise man," Jacob said. They talked about other things as the miles passed. Jacob told her about the Double Bar Ranch, about the challenges of keeping cattle safe from rustlers and predators, about the satisfaction of working land under the endless sky. Helena found herself telling him about Prescott, about the wedding that was supposed to happen in 3 weeks, about Thomas Everett and his merchant business. "You do not sound much excited about this wedding," Jacob observed quietly. Helena was surprised by her own honesty when she replied, "I suppose I am not really. Thomas is a good man, stable and respectable. But when I think about marrying him, I feel more dutiful than joyful. Is that terrible?" "No," Jacob said simply. "It is honest. My mother always said marriage without love is like a house without a foundation. It might stand for a while, but eventually something will crack." "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Jacob said, and something in his voice told Helena not to press further. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jacob found a campsite beside a small spring. The pine forest was thick here, the air noticeably cooler than it had been down in the desert around Prescott. "We should stop for the night," he said. "These tracks are fresh, maybe only 3 or 4 hours old now. We are gaining on her. But riding in the dark through this country is foolish." Helena knew he was right, though she hated to stop. They made camp efficiently, working together without needing many words. Jacob gathered firewood while Helena unpacked their supplies. He showed her how to build a proper fire ring with stones, how to angle the wood for maximum heat and minimum smoke. They ate simply, sharing her dried beef and his hardtack, washing it down with cool spring water. The night sky emerged in all its glory as darkness fell, more stars than Helena had ever seen despite growing up in Arizona. The fire crackled between them, and somewhere in the distance an owl hooted its lonely call. "Tell me about the ring," Jacob said softly. "The thing your sister took. It must be important for you to chase her this far." Helena stared into the flames, feeling the weight of the story. "It was my grandmother's wedding ring, passed down through 4 generations. A gold band with a small diamond. Nothing fancy by city standards, but it means everything to my family. My mother wore it when she married my father. She died giving birth to Rose, and on her deathbed, she made my father promise the ring would go to me when I married." Helena's voice cracked slightly. "Rose knows what it means to me. She knows I am supposed to wear it when I marry Thomas. I cannot understand why she would take it." "Maybe she had a good reason," Jacob suggested carefully. "What reason could possibly justify stealing from your own sister?" Helena shot back, then immediately felt guilty for her sharp tone. "I am sorry. I know you are trying to help. I just feel so betrayed." They sat in silence for a while, the fire popping occasionally. Finally, Jacob spoke again. "My mother gave me a ring too before she died. Her own wedding band. She said to keep it safe and give it to the woman I truly loved when the time came. I have carried it for 11 years now, waiting for that moment." Helena looked at him across the firelight. seeing him clearly for the first time. He was handsome in a rough, honest way, with strong features and eyes that seemed to hold depths she had not noticed before. There was something solid about him, something real that made Thomas Everett seem somehow pale and insubstantial in comparison. You have not found her yet? The woman you truly love? Jacob met her eyes and held them. I thought I had not, but lately I am not so sure. Something in the air between them shifted, becoming charged with a possibility that both frightened and thrilled Helena. She looked away first, her heart beating faster. This was foolish, she told herself. She was engaged to be married. She barely knew this man. And yet there was something about Jacob Nolan that called to a part of her she had not known existed, a part that wanted adventure and honesty, and a love that was more than just dutiful. We should get some rest, she said, her voice not quite steady. Early start tomorrow. Yes, madam, Jacob said, and if he was disappointed by her retreat, he did not show it. They laid out their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. Helena wrapped herself in her blanket and stared up at the stars, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft sounds of the forest at night. Sleep should have come easily after the long day of riding, but her mind was too active, thoughts spinning between worry for Rose, confusion about the theft, and this unexpected, inconvenient attraction to the cowboy who had appeared so providentially when she needed help. She must have slept eventually because she woke to the smell of coffee and the pale light of dawn filtering through the pine trees. Jacob was already up, tending a small fire and heating water in a battered tin pot. Morning, he said, handing her a cup of strong black coffee. Tracks pick up again just east of here. If we push hard today, we might catch up to your sister by afternoon. They broke camp quickly and rode out as the sun climbed higher. The terrain grew increasingly rough, the trail winding through dense forest and across rocky outcroppings. Jacob led the way, his eyes constantly scanning the ground and the surrounding landscape. Helena found herself watching him as much as the trail, admiring the easy way he sat his horse, the quiet competence in everything he did. Around mid-morning, they heard voices ahead. Jacob held up a hand for silence, and they dismounted, tying their horses to a sturdy pine and continuing on foot. Through the trees, Helena could see a small cabin, rough-built and weathered. 2 horses were tied outside, one of them the black mare Rose had stolen. Helena's heart leaped. That is lightning! Rose is here! Wait, Jacob said softly, catching her arm before she could rush forward. Let us see what we are dealing with first. They crept closer, moving from tree to tree until they could hear the voices more clearly. Rose was there, her young voice tearful and desperate. And there was a man's voice, older, angry. You promised me that ring would be worth something, the man was saying. This little chip of diamond is not going to get us far. It is all I have, Rose sobbed. Please, Charlie, it is worth more than you think. It is a family heirloom. We can sell it in Santa Fe and get enough money to start over somewhere new. Helena felt the blood drain from her face. Rose had stolen the ring to run away with a man named Charlie, who sounded rough and mean, and nothing like the kind of person her sweet sister should be involved with. Who is he? Helena whispered to Jacob. Jacob's face was grim. Charlie Bridger, if I am not mistaken. Small-time outlaw, cattle thief, general troublemaker. I have seen wanted posters for him in Prescott. Miss Walsh, your sister has gotten herself mixed up with a very bad man. Before Helena could respond, the cabin door burst open, and Rose came running out, tears streaming down her face. Charlie Bridger followed, a tall man with greasy hair and mean eyes. He grabbed Rose's arm roughly, spinning her around. You are not going anywhere until I say so, girl. You made promises to me, and you are going to keep them. That was all Helena needed to see. She stepped out of the trees, her hand on the revolver at her hip, though she had no real idea how to use it. Let go of my sister, she said, her voice much steadier than she felt. Rose's eyes went wide with shock. Helena, How did you find me? Charlie Bridger looked at Helena with a mixture of annoyance and amusement. Well, now, looks like we got ourselves a rescue party. That is sweet, real sweet. But you should have minded your own business, lady. Jacob stepped out beside Helena, and something in his stance made Charlie reassess the situation. This was not just a foolish woman chasing her sister. This was a man who knew how to handle himself, and Charlie could see it. Jacob Nolan, Charlie said slowly. Heard you were working for Davis now. This your woman? The lady is under my protection, Jacob said calmly. And you are going to let the young one go right now. Charlie laughed, but it was an ugly sound. Or what? You going to outdraw me, Nolan? I am faster than I look. Maybe, Jacob said. Maybe not. But are you willing to bet your life on it? Because I am. The tension stretched out, thick and dangerous. Helena could barely breathe, her eyes darting between Jacob and Charlie, terrified that this confrontation was going to end in violence. Rose had pulled free from Charlie's grip and was backing toward Helena, her face pale with fear. Then, surprisingly, Charlie laughed and held up his hands. Not worth it. I got better things to do than die over some stupid ring. He looked at Rose with contempt. You are more trouble than you are worth anyway, girl. Should have known better than to trust a spoiled rancher's daughter. He went to his horse, mounted up, and rode off without looking back. The three of them stood frozen until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely into the forest. Rose collapsed into Helena's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I did not know what else to do. He said he loved me. He said we would have a beautiful life together if I could just bring something valuable. I was so stupid, Helena. I was so incredibly stupid. Helena held her sister tight, feeling her own tears starting to fall. It is all right. You are safe now. That is all that matters. The ring, Rose choked out. I still have it. I hid it in my pocket. I was going to give it to him, but something made me hesitate. Here. She pulled the ring out with shaking fingers, pressing it into Helena's palm. Helena looked down at the familiar gold band, the small diamond catching the sunlight. She had traveled all this way to retrieve it, had risked so much to get it back. But looking at it now, she felt something strange. The ring suddenly seemed less important than it had been before. It was still precious, still meaningful, but it was just a thing, an object. Rose was her sister, her flesh and blood, and she was safe. That was what truly mattered. Thank you, Helena said softly, slipping the ring into her own pocket. Then she pulled back and looked Rose straight in the eyes. What were you thinking? Running off with a man like that? You could have been killed or worse. Rose wiped her eyes, looking younger than her 19 years. I know. I have been so foolish. He came into town a few months ago, started courting me in secret. He was exciting and dangerous, so different from all the boring boys in Prescott. He told me he loved me, that he wanted to take me away to somewhere exotic. I believed every word. Then last week he said we needed money to run away together, and I thought about the ring and She trailed off miserably. I was a fool. Yes, you were, Helena agreed, but her voice was gentle. But we all make mistakes, Rose, especially when we are young and someone tells us what we want to hear. Jacob had been standing back, giving the sisters space, but now he approached. We should head back to Prescott. It is a long ride, and I do not trust Charlie Bridger to stay gone. He might decide that ring is worth coming back for. They retrieved the horses and started the journey home. Rose rode Lightning while Helena and Jacob kept their earlier mounts. The ride back was slower than the chase had been, partly because they were tired and partly because there was no longer urgency driving them forward. Rose was quiet, lost in her own thoughts and shame. Helena found herself riding beside Jacob, their conversations continuing where they had left off. You handled that well back there, she said. With Charlie Bridger, I thought for sure there would be shooting. Jacob shrugged. Men like Charlie are usually cowards at heart. They prey on people weaker than themselves, but when faced with real opposition, they tend to fold. Still, I am glad it did not come to gunfire. I am a fair shot, but you never know how these things will play out. I do not think I properly thanked you, Helena said, for coming with me, for helping me find Rose. I could not have done this alone. You are stronger than you think, Jacob replied. You were ready to face down an armed outlaw for your sister. That takes courage. They made camp that night in a small clearing, the three of them sitting around the fire. Rose apologized again, and Helena reassured her again, and slowly the terrible tension began to ease. They talked about what they would tell their father, how they would explain Rose's absence. Helena decided on a version of the truth that would spare her sister the worst consequences. She would say Rose had run off in a moment of panic about her own future, and that Helena had gone after her and brought her home. The details about Charlie Bridger could remain private. As Rose fell asleep, wrapped in her bedroll, Helena and Jacob sat together in comfortable silence. The fire burned low between them, and overhead the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. "What will you do about the wedding?" Jacob asked quietly. Helena had been asking herself the same question for the past day. She pulled the ring from her pocket and looked at it, the metal warm from being close to her body. "I do not know," she admitted. "I have the ring back. I could marry Thomas as planned. It would be the sensible thing, the expected thing." "But," Jacob prompted. "But I do not love him," Helena said, the words feeling like both a confession and a liberation. "I thought I could marry him anyway, thought love was not as important as security and respectability. But now I am not so sure. These past 2 days, riding across this country, facing real danger, talking with you." She stopped, uncertain how to continue. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and serious. "Helena, I know we have only known each other a short time. I know you are engaged to another man and that I have no right to speak. But I would regret it for the rest of my life if I did not tell you how I feel." Helena's heart began to pound. "Jacob, Please let me finish," he said. "From the moment I saw you beside that creek, determined and brave and stubborn as a mule, I felt something I have never felt before. These past 2 days, riding with you, talking with you, watching you face down your fears for your sister, I have fallen in love with you, completely and utterly in love with you." Helena could barely breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such raw honesty and emotion. Thomas had courted her properly, had said the right things, but he had never made her feel like her heart might burst from her chest. "I love you too," she whispered, the truth of it overwhelming. "It makes no sense. It is too fast. It should not be possible, but I love you." Jacob reached across the fire and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and strong. "Then do not marry Thomas Everett. Marry me instead. I know I do not have much to offer. I am just a cowboy who works for wages. I do not have a big house in town or a merchant business, but I promise you this. I will love you every day for the rest of my life. I will work hard to give you a good home, and I will never make you feel like you settled for security over happiness." Tears streamed down Helena's face, but they were happy tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Jacob stood and pulled her to her feet, drawing her into his arms. When he kissed her, Helena felt like she was finally coming home, like everything in her life had been leading to this exact moment. The kiss was tender and passionate at once, full of promise and possibility. They sat together by the fire until it burned to embers, making plans and dreaming about their future. Jacob told her about a piece of land he had been saving up for, 20 acres of good grazing land with a spring and enough timber to build a house. He had almost enough money set aside to make a down payment. Helena told him she had some money of her own, saved from years of selling eggs and butter in town. Together, they could make it work. The next day, they reached Prescott in the late afternoon. The town looked the same as always, the familiar buildings lining the main street, but Helena felt like a different person than the one who had ridden out 2 days before. Her father was waiting at the ranch, his relief visible when he saw both his daughters riding in safe and sound. "Thank the Lord," he said, pulling them both into a rough embrace. "I have been worried sick." Helena told him the edited version of the story they had agreed upon, watching her father's face as he listened. He looked at Jacob with new respect when he heard how the cowboy had helped track Rose and bring her home safely. "I owe you a debt," he said to Jacob, shaking his hand firmly. "No debt needed, sir," Jacob replied. "But I would like to ask your permission for something." Helena's father raised his eyebrows. "Oh?" "I would like permission to court your daughter Helena with the intention of asking her to marry me." The silence stretched out. Rose gasped softly. Helena held her breath. Finally, her father spoke. "What about Thomas Everett? You are engaged, Helena." "I need to speak with Thomas," Helena said quietly. "I need to tell him the truth, that I cannot marry him. It would not be fair to either of us." Her father studied her face for a long moment, then looked at Jacob, then back at Helena. "I will not lie and say this is not a shock. Thomas is a good man, and this will cause talk in town. But I raised you to be honest and to follow your heart. If this young man is your choice, then you have my blessing." Helena felt relief wash over her like cool water. She went to her father and hugged him tight. "Thank you, Papa." That evening, Helena rode into town alone to speak with Thomas. She found him at his store, going over ledgers in the back office. He looked up when she entered, his pleasant face breaking into a smile. "Helena, I was starting to worry. Your father sent word that Rose had run off and you had gone after her. I wanted to come help search, but your father said you had already left." He stood and came around the desk. "Are you both all right?" "We are fine," Helena said. "Rose is home safe. Thomas, I need to talk to you about something important." Something in her tone made him pause. "That sounds serious. Please sit down." They sat across from each other, and Helena took a deep breath. "Thomas, you have been nothing but kind and good to me. You deserve a wife who loves you with her whole heart, who is excited to build a life with you. And I realized something these past few days. I am not that woman. I care for you. I respect you, but I do not love you the way a wife should love her husband. It would not be fair to marry you feeling this way." Thomas was quiet for a long moment, his face carefully neutral. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "I see. Is there someone else?" Helena had never been good at lying. "Yes, I met someone while I was looking for Rose, a cowboy named Jacob Nolan. I know it sounds crazy. We have only known each other a few days, but Thomas, I love him. I have never felt anything like this before." She expected anger, hurt, recrimination. Instead, Thomas gave a small, sad smile. "I had wondered if you truly loved me. You always seemed to be holding something back, like you were going through the motions of courtship rather than genuinely wanting to be with me. I told myself it would come with time, that affection would grow into love, but perhaps I was fooling myself." "You are a good man," Helena said earnestly. "Some woman is going to be very lucky to marry you, but it should not be me." Thomas nodded slowly. "I am disappointed, I will not pretend otherwise, but I appreciate your honesty." He held out his hand. "I wish you happiness, Helena. Truly." She shook his hand, feeling grateful for his grace and understanding. She pulled her grandmother's ring from her pocket and set it on the desk between them. "I thought you should know. This was part of why Rose ran away. She stole this ring, planning to sell it to fund running away with a man. A very bad man, as it turned out. We got it back, but the whole incident made me realize something. This ring is important to me because of what it represents, the love between my grandmother and grandfather, between my mother and father. but wearing it while marrying someone I do not truly love would be a betrayal of that legacy. Thomas picked up the ring and studied it. It is beautiful. I hope you will wear it when you marry your cowboy. He handed it back to her with a genuine smile. And I mean that. Helena left the store feeling lighter than she had in months, maybe years. The truth was out, and while it would certainly cause gossip in town, she found she did not care. She had made her choice, and it was the right one. Over the next 3 weeks, Helena and Jacob courted properly, wanting to do things right despite their unorthodox beginning. He came to dinner at the ranch, impressing her father with his knowledge of cattle and land management. He brought her wildflowers from the high country and took her on long rides where they talked for hours about everything and nothing. Rose, feeling guilty about the trouble she had caused, became their staunchest supporter, vouching for Jacob's character to anyone who would listen. The gossip was intense, as expected. The wedding that was supposed to happen between Helena Walsh and Thomas Everett had been the talk of the town for months, and its cancellation created a scandal. People whispered that Helena had gone crazy, that she was throwing away a good match for some drifting cowboy. The church ladies clucked their tongues and predicted disaster. Helena ignored them all. She had never been happier. 1 month after they met, on a warm July evening in 1884, Jacob took Helena back to the spring where they had first camped together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in impossible colors, and the air was cool and sweet with pine scent. Helena Walsh, Jacob said, taking her hands in his, I told you once that my mother gave me her wedding ring before she died and told me to give it to the woman I truly loved. I have waited 11 years for the right moment, and I believe that moment is now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band, worn smooth with age and wear. This was my mother's ring. It is not fancy and it has no diamond, but it represents a love that lasted through hardship and joy, through good times and bad, until death parted them. I would be honored if you would wear it as a symbol of my love for you and accept my proposal of marriage. Helena looked at the ring, then at Jacob's face, seeing all the love and hope shining in his eyes. She thought about her grandmother's ring, safe in her pocket. 2 rings, 2 legacies of love, coming together in this moment. Yes, she said through happy tears. Yes, I will marry you, Jacob Nolan. He slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her close and kissed her as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. They were married in September, in a simple ceremony, at the ranch with just family and close friends present. Helena wore a simple white dress that had been her mother's, and on her left hand she wore both rings, her grandmother's diamond ring and Jacob's mother's gold band. The 2 rings together felt right, like they had been meant to be worn this way all along, 2 families and 2 histories joining into one future. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. The traveling preacher, who rode circuit through the small towns around Prescott, spoke about love and commitment, about building a life together on faith and trust. When Jacob said his vows, his voice was strong and clear, promising to love Helena in sickness and health, in prosperity and hardship, for all the days of his life. When Helena said hers, she meant every word with her whole heart. They honeymooned at the piece of land Jacob had been saving for, camping under the stars while making plans for the house they would build. Helena had never been so happy, lying in Jacob's arms with the campfire crackling nearby, talking about their future. I was thinking about the house, Jacob said one night, tracing patterns on her arm. If we build it facing south, we will get good light in the winter. And there is that grove of cottonwoods by the spring that would make a nice spot for a garden. I like that, Helena said, and we should have a big porch, somewhere to sit in the evenings and watch the sunset. A big porch it is, Jacob agreed. What else? A good-sized kitchen, Helena continued, with lots of windows and at least 3 bedrooms, because I hope we will have children to fill them. Jacob pulled her closer. How many children are you thinking? As many as God sees fit to bless us with, Helena said. What about you? I want a house full of noise and laughter, Jacob said. Boys and girls, enough to keep us busy and remind us why we fell in love in the first place. They spent the rest of their honeymoon working on the land, clearing brush and marking where the house would stand. Jacob was a tireless worker, and Helena matched him hour for hour, both of them putting their labor into building something that was truly theirs. By the time they returned to Prescott, tired and sunburned and blissfully happy, they had the foundation laid for their new life. Jacob continued working for the Double Bar Ranch while they built their house, and Helena took in sewing to add to their savings. They lived in a small room above the general store that the owner rented cheaply, saving every penny they could. It was cramped and simple, but Helena had never been happier. Each evening when Jacob came home from the ranch, covered in dust and smelling like horses and leather, she would greet him with a kiss, and they would sit together planning their future. Rose visited often, having genuinely learned from her mistake with Charlie Bridger. She had matured in the months since the incident, becoming more thoughtful and less impulsive. She helped Helena with her sewing work and often rode out to the property with them on Sundays to help with the house construction. By Christmas, the house was finished. It was a simple structure, just 4 rooms, and that big porch Helena had wanted, but it was sturdy and well built, and it was theirs. They moved in on New Year's Day of 1885, carrying their few possessions across the threshold together. That night they christened every room, laughing and loving and marveling at the fact that they had built this life with their own hands. The first years of their marriage were hard work, but filled with joy. Jacob continued working for Mr. Davis, saving money to buy cattle of their own. Helena kept a large garden, sold eggs from their growing chicken flock, and took in occasional sewing work. Money was tight, but they had everything they needed, and more importantly, they had each other. In the spring of 1886, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She told Jacob one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, the daily ritual they had maintained since moving into the house. I have news, she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. We are going to have a baby. Come October, this house is going to get a lot louder. Jacob's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then pure joy. He let out a whoop of happiness that probably carried all the way to Prescott and pulled Helena into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests to be careful. A baby, he kept saying. We are going to have a baby. Helena, you have made me the happiest man alive. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the summer heat was difficult. Helena worked as much as she could in the cool mornings and evenings, resting during the hottest part of the day. Jacob was anxiously protective, constantly worrying that she was working too hard or not resting enough. Rose came to stay with them in September, wanting to be there to help when the baby came. On October 15th, 1886, after a labor that lasted from dawn until dusk, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James after Jacob's father, and he came into the world with a lusty cry that announced his presence to anyone within earshot. Jacob held his son with shaking hands, tears running down his face as he looked at this tiny miracle they had created. He is perfect, Jacob whispered. Helena, he is absolutely perfect. Those early days with James were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Helena had never known it was possible to love something so completely, so fiercely that it almost hurt. Every tiny sound James made, every small movement, felt like a miracle. Jacob proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with James during fussy nights, changing diapers without complaint, staring at his son with such obvious love that it made Helena fall in love with him all over again. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. In 1888, their second child was born, a daughter they named Margaret after Jacob's mother. She was a calmer baby than James had been, with Jacob's dark eyes and Helena's honey-colored hair. James, now a toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, constantly wanting to help take care of her. By 1890, their cattle herd had grown to 50 head, enough that Jacob was able to quit his job at the Double Bar Ranch and work their own land full time. It was a risk, striking out completely on their own, but it paid off. The ranch prospered under Jacob's careful management, and Helena's garden and chickens provided both food for the family and extra income from selling surplus in town. In 1891, their third child arrived, another boy they named Samuel. He was the most energetic of their children, always moving, always into something. James was 7 now, already helping his father with simple ranch chores, and Margaret at 3 was her mother's shadow, following Helena around and imitating everything she did. The house they had built felt full and alive, exactly as they had hoped. The walls echoed with children's laughter, with the clatter of small feet running through rooms, with bedtime stories and morning songs. Helena and Jacob would sometimes steal moments alone on their porch after the children were asleep, sitting together in comfortable silence or talking about their days. "Do you ever regret it?" Jacob asked one night in the summer of 1892. "Giving up the life you could have had with Thomas Everett, the big house in town, the easy life of a merchant's wife?" Helena looked at him in genuine surprise. "Not for one single second. Jacob, this life, this messy, chaotic, beautiful life we have built together, is worth more than all the big houses and easy comfort in the world. I have never been happier than I am right now, right here with you and our children." Jacob leaned over and kissed her, still able to make her heart race after 8 years of marriage. "I love you, Helena Nolan, more today than yesterday, and less than I will tomorrow." In 1894, their fourth child was born, another daughter they named Clara. She completed their family, the caboose, as Jacob jokingly called her. James was 10 now, a serious boy who loved the ranch and was already talking about the day he would run it with his father. Margaret at 6 was proving to be skilled at sewing and cooking, though she also loved riding and could stay on a horse almost as well as her brothers. Samuel at 3 was still their wild child, constantly getting into mischief, but always with such a charming smile that it was impossible to stay mad at him for long. Rose had married too, finally finding a good man who worked as a blacksmith in Prescott. She and her husband visited often, their own children playing with Helena and Jacob's. The sisters had grown closer through the years, the incident with the stolen ring long forgiven, and now just a story they told sometimes, usually with laughter about how foolish young Rose had been. Helena's father had passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1893, but not before seeing both his daughters happily settled with good men and surrounded by grandchildren. His ranch was sold to a neighbor, and the proceeds split between Helena and Rose, giving both families some extra financial cushion. The Nolan Ranch continued to grow and prosper. By 1898, they had over 100 head of cattle and had bought an additional 40 acres adjoining their original property. They built a new barn, bigger and sturdier than the first one, and added 2 more rooms onto the house to accommodate their growing children. James, now 14, was practically a full partner in the ranch work, able to do a man's job and doing it well. Margaret at 10 was becoming a beautiful young woman, though she still preferred riding horses to the domestic pursuits that interested other girls her age. Samuel at 7 had finally channeled his energy into useful directions, particularly showing a talent for working with horses, and Clara at 4 was everyone's darling, a sweet-natured child who seemed to bring sunshine wherever she went. Through it all, Helena and Jacob's love only deepened. They had weathered the normal storms that every marriage faces, disagreements and frustrations and difficult times. There had been years when drought threatened their herd, when one of the children was seriously ill, when money was so tight they worried about making it through. But they had faced every challenge together, and their partnership had only grown stronger. One evening in the summer of 1899, Helena and Jacob sat on their porch, watching the sunset as always. 15 years had passed since that September day when they had moved into this house, and they were both showing the signs of hard work and passing time. Jacob's dark hair had threads of silver now, and his face was lined from years in the sun. Helena's hands were rougher than they had been in her youth, marked by work and childbearing. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people who had fallen in love beside a spring in the high country, two souls who had recognized each other instantly. "Do you remember the day we met?" Helena asked, watching the sky turn gold and pink. "Of course," Jacob said. "You were standing beside that creek, looking determined and lost at the same time. I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." "I thought you were presumptuous," Helena said with a laugh, assuming I needed help. "You did need help," Jacob pointed out. "You would have gotten hopelessly lost in the high country." "True," Helena admitted. "And I would never have found Rose or gotten the ring back or—" She trailed off, looking at the rings on her left hand, still wearing both her grandmother's diamond and Jacob's mother's gold band together. "Or?" Jacob prompted. "Or found you," Helena finished. "The greatest treasure I found on that journey was not the ring. It was you." "I love you, Helena," Jacob said simply. "I have loved you from that first day, and I will love you until my last breath." They sat together as the stars emerged, one by one, in the darkening sky. From inside the house, they could hear the sounds of their children getting ready for bed. James reading a story to the younger ones, Margaret helping Clara with her nightgown, Samuel probably sneaking one last adventure before sleep. These were the sounds of a life well lived, of a family built on love and commitment and honest hard work. The story could have ended there, with Helena and Jacob sitting on their porch surrounded by the life they had built. But their story continued for many more years, each one adding new layers to their love story. James married at 21, bringing a sweet-faced girl named Lucy to the family. They built a house on the far corner of the property, and James took over more and more of the ranch operations as Jacob's joints began to ache from years of hard work. Margaret married at 19, scandalizing the town slightly by choosing a school teacher rather than a rancher, but proving that the intellectual match was perfect for her. Samuel, true to form, did not settle down until nearly 30, finally falling for a widow with 2 children of her own, creating an instant large family that suited his energetic nature. And Clara married at 22, choosing a young veterinarian who had moved to the area, bringing new expertise to help manage the ranch's growing herds. Helena and Jacob became grandparents many times over, their house once again filling with the sounds of children, though now it was grandchildren who ran through the rooms and played in the yard. They watched their family tree grow and branch, each new generation carrying forward the legacy of love and hard work they had established. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1909, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The whole community came, filling the yard with tables of food and music and laughter. Helena wore her best dress, and on her hand the 2 rings still gleamed, a little more worn, but still beautiful. Jacob gave a speech, his voice still strong, though his hair was completely silver now. "25 years ago, I married the woman I loved," he said, holding Helena's hand. "I have never regretted that decision for even a moment. She has been my partner, my best friend, my love, and the mother of my children. Every good thing in my life has come from the day I met her beside a spring in the high country when she was chasing her runaway sister and I was just a cowboy checking fence lines." He turned to Helena. "You are my heart, Helena Nolan. You always have been, and you always will be." There was not a dry eye in the crowd as he kissed her, this man and woman who had built such a beautiful life together, against all odds. The party continued long into the night, with music and dancing, and the kind of joy that comes from a community celebrating 2 people who truly belong together. The years continued to pass, each bringing its own joys and sorrows. Jacob's joints grew more painful, arthritis from years of hard physical work finally catching up with him. Helena's eyesight began to fade, making the sewing she loved more difficult, but they adapted, slowing down but never stopping, always finding ways to be useful and productive. They celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1914, their 35th in 1919, their 40th in 1924. Each milestone was marked with family gatherings, with the telling and retelling of old stories, with the laughter of grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch had been divided among their children, each taking responsibility for their own section, but all working together as a family enterprise. In 1929, as Helena and Jacob celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary, they were in their late 60s and early 70s, respectively. They had lived through enormous changes, seeing the wild frontier of their youth transformed by automobiles and electricity and telephones. The world had fought a terrible war that took some of the young men they knew and loved. The country had changed in ways they could never have imagined when they first met in 1884. But some things had not changed. They still sat on their porch every evening, watching the sunset together. They still held hands like young lovers. They still looked at each other with the same love and devotion that had brought them together all those decades ago. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night we camped together?" Helena asked one evening, her voice softer with age, but still clear. "Which thing?" Jacob asked. "I said a lot of foolish things, as I recall." "You said your mother told you that marriage without love is like a house without a foundation," Helena reminded him. "You were right. We built our house, our life, on love, and it has stood strong through everything." Jacob squeezed her hand gently. "Best decision I ever made was following you that day. Well, second best. The best decision was asking you to marry me." "And mine was saying yes," Helena replied. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in colors that never got old no matter how many times they saw them. The land around them was quiet, the cattle settled for the night, the horses in their barn, their children and grandchildren in their own homes nearby. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes from a life well lived and a love well loved. In the spring of 1930, Jacob fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, then developed into pneumonia. Helena nursed him with the same fierce devotion she had brought to everything in their life together, sitting by his bedside day and night, refusing to leave him alone. Their children took turns keeping vigil, but it was Helena's hand Jacob held, Helena's voice he listened for. On a warm May evening, with the windows open and the smell of apple blossoms drifting in, Jacob opened his eyes and looked at Helena sitting beside his bed. She looked old now, her honey-colored hair completely white, her face lined with the years. But to Jacob, she was still the beautiful woman he had met beside that spring, 46 years ago. "Helena," he whispered, his voice weak. "I am here," she said, taking his hand. "I am right here, my love." "Thank you," Jacob said, each word an effort. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for this beautiful life. Thank you for loving me." "Thank you for finding me," Helena replied through her tears. "Thank you for seeing me when I did not even see myself. Thank you for every day, every moment, every breath we have shared." Jacob smiled, that same honest smile that had captured her heart so long ago. "I love you, Helena Nolan. I will love you forever." "And I love you, Jacob Nolan," Helena said, pressing his hand to her cheek. "In this life and whatever comes after." He closed his eyes then, his breath coming slower and slower. Helena sat with him as the sun set one last time for them together, as the stars emerged in the darkening sky. And sometime in the deep night, with Helena holding his hand and whispering her love, Jacob Nolan took his last breath and went peacefully into whatever awaited beyond. Helena mourned him deeply as she had loved him, but she did not regret a single moment of their life together. At his funeral, attended by more people than could fit in the church, she spoke about their love story. She told about the chase after Rose, about meeting Jacob when she needed help most, about falling in love in just days and building a life that lasted for decades. She told about the 2 rings she wore, symbols of 2 families coming together, and about how she would wear them until the day she joined Jacob again. Helena lived for 4 more years, staying in the house they had built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She remained sharp and active, still tending her garden, still sitting on the porch every evening watching the sunset, though now she sat alone. But she was not really alone because she felt Jacob's presence with her always, in the house they had built, in the family they had raised, in the land they had worked together. On a warm September evening in 1934, almost exactly 50 years after she and Jacob had first moved into their house, Helena sat on the porch watching the sunset. Her children had come to visit, worried because she seemed more frail lately, but she had shooed them away, wanting this time alone. She looked at the rings on her hand, thinking about the journey that had begun when Rose stole one of them, the journey that had led her to the love of her life. As the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars appeared, Helena felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had lived a good life, a life rich with love and family and purpose. She had known true love, the kind that sustains through hardship and grows deeper with time. She had raised good children who were raising good children of their own. She had worked hard, loved deeply, and lived honestly. She closed her eyes, and in her mind she saw Jacob standing there, young and strong, and smiling that smile that had captured her heart. He held out his hand to her, and she took it, feeling young again herself. They walked together into the starlight, into forever, two souls who had found each other against all odds and never let go. They found her the next morning, sitting peacefully in her porch chair with a smile on her face, the two rings still gleaming on her left hand. Her children wept, but they also celebrated because they knew their parents were together again. At her funeral, they buried her beside Jacob on a hill overlooking the land they had loved, and on her gravestone they inscribed simply, "Beloved wife and mother." She found her heart's home in the high country and never strayed from it. The Nolan ranch continued for generations, each new family adding their own chapter to the story. But the tale that was told most often, the one that became family legend, was the story of Helena and Jacob, how they met when she was chasing her runaway sister, how he helped her track Rose through the high country, how they fell in love in just days and stayed in love for a lifetime, how a stolen ring led to a love story that lasted 50 years and beyond. The two rings themselves were passed down through the family, eventually given to one of their great-granddaughters when she married. She wore them together on her left hand, just as Helena had done, and told her own children the story of where they came from. A story about love found in unexpected places, about courage and honesty and commitment, a story about two people who chose each other and never regretted that choice. And on warm summer evenings, when the sun sets over the Arizona hills painting the sky in impossible colors, if you listen carefully, you might hear the echo of laughter from that porch, the sound of a man and woman who loved each other completely, who built a life and a family and a legacy that endured long after they were gone. Their story became part of the land itself, woven into the fabric of the high country where they met, a reminder that true love, when you are brave enough to choose it, can overcome any obstacle and last beyond death itself. The ranch house still stands, though it has been added on to and modernized over the decades. The porch where Helena and Jacob sat watching sunsets for so many years is still there, and family members make a point of sitting there sometimes, continuing the tradition. The land is still worked, still productive, still beautiful in that stark way that only Arizona can be. And somewhere in the family archives, carefully preserved, are two rings, a gold band with a small diamond, and a simple gold band worn smooth with age. They represent not just the joining of two people, but the power of love to transform lives, to build futures, to create something lasting and beautiful from what began as a desperate chase after a runaway sister and a stolen ring. Helena and Jacob's story reminds us that love often comes when we least expect it, that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones we never planned to take, and that choosing love over convenience or expectation or what others think we should do is always, always worth it. They chose each other in 1884, built a life together through joy and sorrow, through prosperity and hardship, and their love story became the foundation on which generations of family were built. It is a story worth remembering, worth retelling, worth celebrating, because it shows us what is possible when two people commit to loving each other completely, honestly, and forever.